Hi, everyone. It's Louisa de Jesus here from LD Human Resources. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days trying to balance home and work all together to join me. So today we are going to be talking about guidelines for employers in reopening the workplace and what that means to you and your workplace as an employer, and also perhaps to your team, definitely, as they feel confident and comfortable that they're able to return to the workplace. Just to give you an update, today we had 258 cases reported. There was a recent statistics in terms of unemployment, and it is quite high, the unemployment rate at 13% as a Canadian average. The last time we've seen numbers like that in terms of unemployment was in December 1982. So quite some record-breaking statistics here. And what we're finding is, although we have less people working, those who are working as well seem to be working less hours in general. So the statistics are even greater in terms of the number of hours of work that are taking place. Although I do think that for some businesses, they're doing a little bit more work because they're doing more with less. So we're going to talk a little bit about today our roadmap and what that means, a quick overview, prepare for the reopening. So how can we help guide you through that reopening plan? And there's different industries as well. So what are the specifics of those industries? We're going to be covering all that. I'll talk about some employer do's and don'ts and considerations for a successful plan implementation, so that we're considering all aspects: employer, employee, consumer, and your industry and your business in general before we open up to Q&A. My name is Louisa de Jesus, and I am the founder and president of LD Human Resources. We provide human resources support, whether it's strategic, project-based, ongoing, as your HR department, as some of our clients call us, hands-on, pretty much whatever your needs are from a people perspective, we've got you covered. We also support in a variety of different industries, from manufacturing, construction, retail services, professional services, professional, in real estate, really any area. We've got you covered: construction, manufacturing, and so on. I have an amazing team that works alongside me, and I'll speak to them in just a moment. Myself, I've been in HR for probably over 25 years, and I've had the opportunity to work for large corporate environments as well as the small owner managed. And my preference is to support the small owner managed, as we take up 80% of our economy in terms of work and jobs and in general. And really, if we have a better environment at work, we're all much happier in terms of our mental health. My team, as I mentioned, an awesome team. I've got Nancy, Nadia, of course myself, Julie, Christina, and Christina. We're certified professionals in the industry and have a variety of different skill sets and expertise that we offer, from specialists in specific industries or pretty much all areas of HR to support our clients. So let's talk about the roadmap and what that means for Ontario and your business, and how is it that we're moving from one stage to the next. So you'll see here that we do have 3 different stages when it comes to Ontario's roadmap. The first stage is where we are right now, where we have select workplaces that are being able to reopen as long as they're meeting those physical distancing requirements. So ensuring that we have, the 6 feet apart or 2 meters distance, and most people are allowed to attend events. They've expanded the number of people at funerals. There's been hospitals now that are able to reopen for elective or non-urgent surgeries. There's been a number of businesses. Marinas have been able to open up golf courses, um, pet groomers, lawn care, landscaping, and upcoming on Tuesday, May 19th, we'll see that other construction, non-essential construction sites are also able to open. Garden centers, hardware stores, some retail stores that have storefront access. But all needs to say is that it will really depend on, as a consumer, how busy those workplaces are to reopen in general as well. But that's really the first stage, is within the confines of those specific businesses. And then as we move from one stage to the next, there'll be a number of factors that are determined in that. There's no set deadlines or time frames, but rather it's a roadmap, as Ford called it. So in stage 2, we'll see the reopening of other industries, service industries, retail, offices, more outdoor spaces, public parks, such will be able to open. And pretty much most offices would be open in stage 2, where we're going to start to see things getting back to regular work environments. Although I do believe that it's going to shift into terms of what's a regular work environment, with a lot more work from home options taking place, as we know the virus is still among us. So proceeding with caution is really the key here. In stage 3, there'll be more restrictions on public gatherings, although we'll see that for the unforeseeable future, we probably will not have too many concerts or public gatherings with a number of people, weddings and conferences. Those things are really to be determined, dependent on the virus containment. Ontario is listening to our people, whether it's through not-for-profit agencies or chambers of commerce or professional associations, or even as yourself as an employer or a resident of Ontario. You can go on to ontario.ca and provide your feedback. There is a link there. Otherwise, they're really, reaching out to their local MPPs into these different communities to be able to seek out that feedback. So how is it that we're going to determine going from one stage to the others? And this is going to be the determining factors. There's 4 factors. Virus spread and containment is the first. So there has to be a consistent 2 to 4 week decrease in the number of new daily COVID cases. We're seeing the track is going down, although as we start to loosen restrictions, there is talk of a second wave and potential risks of other individuals contracting the virus. We also have to see a number of cases that aren't able to be traced, that they're going to increase the number of cases that we're tracing, the rate there, and again, less cases in the hospitals as well. Health system capacity is going to be the other factors. We need to make sure we have enough ventilators and PPE for the frontline workers, so that we're able to effectively respond to the number of cases that are going to the hospitals. Public health system capacity. So this might vary from hospital to hospital, but essentially approximately 90% of new COVID cases are being reached by public local health system capacity. So that number really has to be maintained in terms of the effective public health response to any kind of resurgence, case resurgence. So we really need to be prepared. And then the incident tracking capacity. So making sure those vulnerable populations we're able to detect any outbreaks quickly, that ongoing testing is taking place, and that we're even shifting to new ways of testing so that we can be sure that we're maintaining and tracking and addressing any specific COVID cases, so that we're aware and the spread is being contained or stopped altogether. So in terms of reopening, well, we have a number of businesses, and this might apply to you now as well. So what's in place? Well, we have to make sure that We're maintaining that physical distancing. There's really a number of other factors when it comes to reopening the workplace. Things like having policies around the directional ways of your hallways, and maybe putting um, markings on the floor as to where people should be in relative distance to another individual. Workspaces, if we're not having with the 6 feet apart from one workstation to another. Perhaps having less people in the office, you can maintain that physical distancing. We also are seeing barriers being put up, those plexiglasses, definitely at the grocery stores and front-facing client environments. Very, very important to maintain that. Perhaps having masks for your staff and gloves if they're in a specific industry. We really have to ensure that we're providing proper hand sanitizing opportunities. So running water, soap, wash the hands, hand sanitizer, providing cleaning products so that people can wipe down their stations. Definitely not sharing any kind of pens, tools, eliminating or reducing the amount of contact or meetings that you're going to have. So, having continuing the work from home arrangement or Zoom meetings and such. And also staggering those start times, break times, lunches, making sure that we are able to reduce the amount of contact or gatherings of individuals. I have clients that are also removing, if we had 3 different entrances that we normally had into the building, well, now we're having one entrance point, so we can ensure that we're wiping down those doors effectively, and that we know when people are coming in and out, perhaps even checking temperatures. Really putting signs up is going to be key. Having a visitor log, making sure that people are who are coming into the office know that, if they've experienced any kind of COVID symptoms, that they're not to enter, and perhaps reschedule their meeting. Also tracking those people so that if they leave and there's a potential case, you can alert them, or, they can alert you, and you can alert your staff because you're aware. There's a number of different pieces that we really need to implement and having people return to work. Maybe reducing the amount of touch points. So if you had a disposable, coffee machines you offered, well, maybe we'll have disposable cups, or maybe don't even offer that coffee anymore. I have clients that have said, you have to bring your own cooler bag so that you're not putting your reusable bag into the fridge, which again could be some sort of virus containment. So giving thought in depth to the different types of things, increasing your cleaning services. How are they cleaning? Are they wet dusting or are they dry dusting? Dry dusting does potentially spread that virus if there was something on the surface. So very, very important and key pieces to consider as we're reopening the workplace, and really need to give specific thought to your environment. And as you can see, it's all around hygiene. And the main piece to consider here and to think about is that we have individuals that maybe they've been working all along and they're desensitized, so they're not used to it. We see it at the grocery store, right? You're in an aisle going to get something, you may or may not have a mask. Instead of someone waiting for you to finish to go get their items that are on the shelf, they're just coming through. So not really respecting that distancing, social distancing. Definitely they have less people in the stores and they're controlling that, but you really can't control people's behaviors. However, what you can do in a workplace environment is definitely put some policies, educate, assure staff so that everyone feels confident and comfortable that safety is the primary concern and they're respecting each other's boundaries, and respecting that has to be top of mind as well. I'll give you an example where it's something that we'll have to adjust. As I mentioned, some have different sensitivities than others and awareness. I had to go to the bank the other day with my elderly parents, and we met in the branch manager's office. She didn't have a mask. She just told us that she feels she touches her face more. She wasn't really recognizing that the elderly customers across from her are the ones that she's putting at risk by not having a mask. So that mask would protect yourself, but more importantly, those that are around you, if you're within that 5 feet, within that 6 feet, 2 meter distance. With respect to that environment, we were all in an enclosed area. I then had to go to the teller. She's handing me my driver's license card. Really, they had no gloves, no masks. They were shoulder to shoulder trying to figure something out on the computer. A lot of different factors that perhaps, they're not recognizing are very important to implement, because if one person were to get the virus in that branch, it could be very well everyone in that branch, and some customers could have contacted it. So, and more importantly, these forms that we went to sign, can we not adjust as a business to doing these things online, because our customers are not comfortable. And, as employees, we're not comfortable always meeting with those staff or those individuals if we don't have to. So just some real examples I wanted to share where we need to adjust, be mindful, respectful, and communicate most effectively to both our customers and our staff to ensure that those guidelines are being met and implemented as effectively as possible and consistently as possible. So let's talk about the reopening specific guidelines to the industries. So we do have a number of different industries that have been outlined. I'm going to talk about these 5 here: construction, restaurant, food processing, agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, hospitality. So in the construction industry, we're finding that this is going to be open all effective Tuesday. We've really upped the game here in construction with respect to COVID. They've all ensured that they are now not having multiple sites where people can get on job sites, but one entry point, so we can track how many and who and what trade is going to be on site. Having less people in the elevator hoists at a time, or having less people on site in general at a time, ensuring there's proper running water and toilets, porta potties, hand sanitizer, soap, these things that necessarily were not always available or existing in job sites are definitely mandatory and important to have now, and they are really being implemented vigorously from a number of the GCs, the general contractors. Really avoiding hand and power tools, any kind of sharing of tools. Pens, as I mentioned, for one industry is like tools for another. Removing coffee trucks and food trucks from site. So a number of different pieces. And as I mentioned, conducting those meetings outdoors as much as possible. In the restaurant and food processing, services, retail industry, a number of different things. We've already seen this as part of the opening, or those that are maintaining operations in the food industry, right? Removing cash payment as much as possible so that you're paying with contactless payment options, minimizing the contact with the customers, making sure that, as you're handling goods and payment, you're maintaining that social distancing. We're seeing masks, the barriers, the plexiglass, eliminating the door payments for deliveries and having prepayment options, adding the floor markings and the barriers, and ensuring that you're controlling how many people are in your facility at one time or in your place of business, not accepting reusable bags. Things that I had seen just recently, an article from Tim Hortons. They're going to do their best in ensuring that customers are comfortable going to their place and sitting and having a coffee again. Once that opens. And what they're preparing for is having signs where they see the tables are sanitized, providing hand sanitizer to all the customers, perhaps even masks, so that customers know that this table has just been sanitized and is safe to sit at. Again, contactless payment, removing all of the in-house cups and going completely disposable, so that they're reducing any kind of virus can spread in that sense. On the agriculture side, very similar to the other industries where we're having less people or minimizing the number of people that are on site. each piece of equipment. If you're going to share it, make sure that there's a clean protocol thereafter and before, if you can't avoid sharing of those equipments, holding those meetings in a large or space or outdoor space. And really rescheduling unnecessary meetings from your supply chain partners and your vendors, or really anyone who doesn't need to be there right now. On the manufacturing side is where we see a lot of adjustments. So, having perhaps your HVAC service come in and install air purifiers and having less recycled air into that manufacturing plant and more airflow to reduce any kind of spread of recycled air. Considering maybe a captive boot or personal protective equipment program so that we're limiting the amount of equipment or use of outdoor, for example, shoes or anything outside of the processing environment. Making sure that there's the site sanitation protocols for things like boot wear cleaning, boot buddies or boot sanitizing trays. As I mentioned, we may have less manufacturing in general. If we've got a plant that we have, less than 5 feet each station of producing a piece of that equipment, well, we may either have to install those physical barriers of the plexiglasses or have less people operating at one time. So a lot of different pieces in the manufacturing. And then in the tourism and hospitality industry, we will see a lot of these perks that we loved about our hotels be really done away with. So, valet services, for example. Well, we're not going to have the one person going into every vehicle, so those are going to be eliminated. Perhaps face-to-face meetings will be reduced. They're going to start perhaps even checking temperatures, limiting the amount of people that are in their place of business at one time. Screening those incoming guests, making sure that we've got hand sanitizer for visitors. There will be no more buffets. We'll have pre-packaged food stations or pre-packaged food. Perhaps the guest self-service, such as, the in-room glassware, in-room amenities, those things that are shared will no longer be available. Taking out those coffee machines and maybe only offering them as on demand as necessary. A big adjustment that we'll see, even we've seen in the travel industry, they're removing seats from airplanes or installing plexiglasses. So it'll be really interesting to see how the travel industry, especially these resorts where we see a lot of, buffets and such, it's going to be a big adjustment in terms of how they're going to be able to offer their services. So getting into the next section is some employer do's and don'ts. Very common sense, some of these pieces, but it's really an additional effort that we need to be mindful of and ensure that we're doing. So that being said, over communication is going to be key. We need to make sure that we're continuing to alert or keep in touch with our staff in terms of what they're doing, managing performance, absolutely, but keeping in check with how they're feeling. Everyone has a different home situation, from children at home, doing at home schooling. Some have younger children versus older, trying to teach them and manage their emotions and stresses of their children as well. Perhaps you've got elderly care taking place at home because you wanted to take them out of the long-term care environment to reduce that high risk to that individual. So, a lot of different pressures. Perhaps, they're doing groceries for their elderly parents, and they've got additional responsibilities put on them now that normally weren't there. So really being mindful of the different scenarios and checking in and providing as much accommodation and flexibility. If the work can get done at their time, at their pace, then allow the work to get done how it is. Of course, maintaining that communication to make sure the deadlines are being met. Providing resources for mental health, ensuring that your staff are getting out there for a walk or taking the 10 minutes that they're walking away from their desk, stretching. There's a lot of resources on the CAMH website from a mental health perspective. I encourage you to go check that out. Also, making sure that you're being clear and transparent with your team. So if now, you're thinking of reopening the workplace, there's a lot of anxieties and insecurities and unknown about that. We've got children at home, so what if I can't come to work? Can I keep working as I am? And how do you make sure that I'm going to be safe at work when we only have, two bathrooms on this floor, for example, in a smaller office? So, you know, thinking through all of these pieces and communicating to your staff is very important. Also, showing that gratitude for the team, appreciating those small wins that we're getting through this together, and that we're actually in operation, that we can keep a job in this environment that's an unprecedented time. It's very important to seek out that feedback from your staff. So I have one of our clients, for example, that they did a survey to just have a pulse on how people are feeling about returning to work and what are some of their concerns. Also had another one check in saying, what's working, what's not, how can we support you to be able to work through this environment during unprecedented times. From a systems perspective, it may be different working from home. It take longer, again, with the balance with the home life that's taking place. Definitely from a don't perspective, we don't want to hold in-person crowded meetings, and these things can be done outdoors or online. We want to make sure that we're addressing our concerns of the staff and getting back to them as soon as possible, talking through some of those anxieties. And definitely, we don't want to ignore any kind of racial discrimination that still exists, unfortunately, surrounding the virus, the COVID-19 virus. So, making sure that we shut those things down as soon as possible. So those are some general do's and don'ts. I think when you're as transparent and honest as possible and being sincere and human with your team, they're going to respond most effectively and work their best and maybe even harder during this difficult time, so that they can maintain your business and have a job and flourish through this difficult situation and unprecedented, uncharted territories. So what are some of the considerations? I mean, we had some questions already come through where, what if staff don't want to return to work and we're ready to open the business? There's some reasons, right? There's reasons that, school's not open yet. We know that it's going to be until May 31st. We know that that's something that the schools are going to keep working from a home, learn from home environment. Perhaps they're concerned about their safety, or they have elderly parents that they care for, as I mentioned, or high risk children. So are these reasons to not return to work? When it comes to family status, COVID-19 is in that protected family status ground with Bill 186. However, a reason where we have here when employees can earn more money on CERB, that's not a reason under the protective grounds. But that might be a reason, but they're surfacing in different reasons. So, what do we do if those staff don't want to come to work? How do we run our business without our staff? We really can't do that. Again, accommodating as much as possible, having them work from home, maybe looking at cross-training opportunities if they've got other reasons that they cannot work, having someone within the team that has a skill set that can pick up and support in that individual's absence is an option. And then lastly, hiring temporary workers. You do need to keep that job for that person when they're ready to return to work. However, you can maybe hire on a temporary basis, although not ideal in terms of the training and environment and, having someone new start in this type of situation, starting working from home. There's a lot of opportunities and training tools and onboarding initiatives that you can definitely implement from a work from home environment and still be able to get that job done and support your business and your organization. So those are some options. What we do need to look at, though, is how do we hire someone temporary if we don't know when this person's going to be able to return to work? You really have to go with the dates that you do know. So we know that the end of May, school is, a deadline that we're going to be either returning, or maybe other childcare or camps are going to be open. So we have to look at when these things are going to be opened and available. Maybe we use that as a date. We know that CERB at this point is going to be ending at the end of August. So maybe we use that as a date. So a number of different sort of options to consider what the timelines, or maybe you do month to month and sort of extend at that point as well, depending on the circumstance and the type of job that they're doing. So could a layoff trigger a potential constructive dismissal case? Absolutely. There is that risk, although, some industries, they have it as part of their employment contract. It's common that they may have temporary layoffs in their industry, such as construction environments, or other seasonal businesses. But for those such as, for example, in the finance industry, maybe we never had that circumstance. It's not as common, and we didn't have it in our employment contract. Could the trigger constructive dismissal? It could, although it will be interesting to see what case law yields when these court cases are going to be heard in court. Because if this is a reason for a business, and many businesses, this is a strategy to keep their business in operation, that might be the only way to keep a job for that person to return to, is by doing a temporary layoff. If we had to terminate and rehire, well, then there's a lot of associated costs with that. And, it could put the business out. The key piece is going to be to ensure that there's the right intentions. If our intentions are to keep the business in operation, and we're being consistent amongst, how we're applying layoffs and what circumstances, well, then it really will reduce your risk. Whereas if you have the wrong intentions and, you take this opportunity to kind of rid of those troubled individuals that have been part of your organization, then that is definitely more high risk. And as I mentioned, some of those do's and don'ts, it's really about how do you communicate, and how have you been transparent with your teams so that they're not in shock as we're working through the various stages to get there. Some of the other considerations are also from a business perspective. We've had to quickly adapt and move into work from home mode, or shut down or reduce certain services for our business. So we've done a contingency plan so far. Is it working? What worked? What didn't work? So looking at what your contingency plan, should there be a second wave that hits, and what lessons learned have you had that can continue to maintain your operation most effectively? One other option and consideration is when you have staff returning to work, potentially having work teams. So can you have work teams come in place where you only have, 4 or 5 individuals in the office at one time? Let's say if you're a team of 10. So you split those teams, shift 1, shift 2, maybe they come Monday to Wednesday, or 1 week on in the office, 1 week off, work from home, so that if there is a potential COVID case, you're able to still run your operation with those other individuals on the opposite work team that hadn't been in contact with that individual that has a confirmed case. So some considerations there. The other pieces are really important to consider from a business. So, what demands have changed with the reopening? Are your consumers spending the same amount of money? Are your businesses that you have been in operation with from a B2B perspective, how are they doing? So what kind of activity and what work is there for the staff to go back to? So very, very important to consider those pieces to determine, how and when your team comes back to work. That's all for the presentation portion. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I do see a question that's come in from one of our individuals here in the audience. And the question is, what happens if they open the camps and you just have decided that you don't want to bring your, someone on your team says they still have childcare issues and camps are available. Perhaps they chose not to send their child to that camp for whatever reason, and they didn't feel comfortable. Can they force you to go back to work? Again, this is something that's protected under the protective leave for family status under Bill 186. So, definitely you can say, I don't feel comfortable, I have childcare, and we'll have to adjust and accommodate as much as possible from an employer perspective. So great question, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I don't see any other questions coming in. So if you do have any other questions, my contact information is here. Trying our best to keep up to date with what's going on to support you, our business owners, in returning to work and ensuring that your employees feel safe and comfortable and we can operate as effectively and as possible in rebuilding Ontario's economy. So please do feel free to reach out anytime. And thank you again for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.